Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining me for episode 18 of the Treat Dogs Like Dogs podcast. And today I have a video of Zak George discussing his stance on aversive methods, the science-based training, and all of that stuff. So we're going to watch some of it, and I am going to let you know what I think about it as we go. So here we go.
Last week, we posted a video on the American Veterinary Society of Animal Behavior's new position statement on dog training methods. The crux of that video was that they no longer support using aversive methods in any known situation. That's what we took from it. We made a 36-minute video talking about it. And so the position statement basically said positive reinforcement methods should be used for all dog training.
Including the treatment of behavior problems, which I thought was the most profound.
And I think that was where most of the controversy lied. There are still a lot of people who favor the use of aversive tools, and I think I understand why. The biggest point that was made in the comments was, okay, fine, use it for your training, use it for basics, but difficult dogs, aggressive dogs, should you use positive reinforcement there? And that's where I think a lot of people were having a tough time accepting it. I can understand why people think that way. Before I was a dog trainer, I thought the same way.
Okay, so it's not just difficult cases, it's in general. Aversives is a way to communicate with a dog what not to do. It supersedes their own motivations to do something, whether it's jumping a fence, running out the door, barking and lunging at people, killing an animal. It's it's useful. It's yeah.
I was a dog trainer, I thought the same way. It was like, if your dog does something you don't like, punish it in some way, you know, in a humane way, but punish the dog to make sure they don't do it. If they jump on the counter, pull them down. If they jump on you, maybe put your knee up to keep them from jumping on you. Again, pre-dog training days.
Well, sure. Like, how could they know what they're doing?
The pre-dog training days, um, Zak is saying that pre-dog training days, that's what he thought he should do. But after he became a dog trainer, no more aversives. So I did find this little funny clip from Zak. Here, let's watch it.
See if I can get a look at me. Wait. See if I can get a look at me. Wait.
All right. So as you can see, it replayed twice. The weight isn't the problem. He's using a leash correction, a leash pop. Whether it's a light leash pop or a strong leash pop, he's still using it, which is an aversive. And as it looks like, you can replay that if you like. What it looks like is that it's not the first time he's done this because the dog knows exactly what is going on here. The dog engages immediately afterwards, and Zak looked very fluid in doing that, which means that there might be some stuff we don't see off camera with his dog.
Again, pre-dog training days.
Well, sure. Like, how could they know what they're doing wrong if you don't tell them?
When you tend to really do your best, and I say do your best because I know it's impossible to be perfect. When you try to live in that positive reinforcement quadrant and you really focus on finding the most minute, tiny ways to reinforce behavior, when you do like it, it's really eye-opening. The thing that never ceases to amaze me about science.
The thing that I need to put out there is that he keeps saying reinforce behavior, reinforce this, reinforce that. Reinforcement is only there to increase the likelihood of a behavior happening. There's a lot of little nuances we can get into, and I'm sure we will, but all reinforcement is increasing the likelihood of a behavior, not decreasing.
About science, though, is that it is almost exclusively more interesting than anything you could have ever dreamed up when you look into the details.
True.
This is potentially another example of that. It's more intuitive.
I have looked into the details. We'll discuss it shortly.
True.
This is potentially another example of that. It's more intuitive to the average person to punish bad behavior to discourage it from happening in the future than it is to find positive moments in your dog's existence to reinforce, to either counteract those undesired behaviors or prevent them from happening in the first place.
it's more natural to punish undesirable behaviors. It's not bad behaviors. There is no such thing as a bad behavior or a good behavior. That's a human concept. There's no bad dog. There's no good dog. At a baseline, dogs are opportunistic predators with knives in their mouths. They're going to gravitate towards things that they feel good about or that make them feel good or things they want, or they're going to stay away from things that don't feel good, things they don't want, right? um, at a baseline. So dogs are gonna dog, right? It's a human morality construct we create on what is a good behavior and what is a bad behavior. I don't live in an HOA. My dogs dig in the yard. To me, that's a whatever behavior. Dogs are gonna dog, right? If I lived in an HOA, I might deem that as a bad behavior or an unwanted behavior. So let's continue.
Happening in the first place, right? That's not intuitive necessarily. Yet, science is uncovering something.
It does not come naturally to me at all to think, what can I do to stop anything bad from happening before it happens? Like, I don't know, if I get a dog and I let them loose in my house, my natural feeling is like, take off the leash and then watch them become a tornado of destruction and see what I have to do from there.
Um, That's a very disingenuous statement coming from somebody that lives with a famous dog trainer. Uh, it does come naturally to a good dog owner to put management protocol in place to keep their dog safe and to make sure things don't happen, right? An example would be our trash cans. There's a lot of things in our trash cans that smell good to a dog. There's also a lot of things in the trash can that can kill your dog. Good pet owners are going to make sure the dogs can't get into that trash can from day one, right? Dogs that don't have any training yet are possibly going to just run out the door. Good pet owners are not just going to leave that door open. I mean, that's that's such a shitty statement. It does come naturally to people that actually give a shit.
To do from there. So like see them mess up and then be like, oh, that's a thing I have to fix and that's a thing I have to fix, instead of just saying, I'm going to show you how to be good.
The bottom line is that the latest science seems to be suggesting that yes, even for some of the most problematic behavior problems, positive reinforcement should be used.
I expected the aversives to have a higher risk of fallout. I also expected the aversives to work a little faster. It was interesting.
Okay, so it depends on what we're training. Yes, aversives are going to work a lot faster to decrease behavior, because that's kind of how behaviors decrease is via punishment. If you're doing an opposing behavior, it's going to take a hell of a lot longer to dampen out the unwanted behavior, but you're never going to truly get rid of it because the dog might be motivated to do that behavior, and there's nothing that's ever been told not to do it. Like, what is the dog going to do if it's never been told what not to do? It's going to do whatever the fuck it wants. Yeah, I mean, and the science is saying that positive reinforcement can work with any dog in any case, right? Uh, what people on the positive reinforcement side of things don't really explain, and what they're not explaining is that all of these studies are done in a very controlled laboratory or non-laboratory, but very controlled environment. That's not how life works. Life is not controlled environments 24/7. So there's that aspect. Also, if you actually go into the websites of the people that they're talking about, like the American Veterinarian Association of Animal Behavior, I believe they said, AVSAB, and you look at their mission statements, they will cite all of their studies. Copy those, paste them into Google, click on the links to the actual studies, go down to the conclusion. And what you'll see most of the time is that they're either surveys that show correlation and not causation. A good example would be there's a correlation to reactive and aggressive dogs and aversive tools. But in those studies, they'll also say That's not causation, though, because it is just as likely that the dogs were reactive or aggressive, and then the owners used and got the tools like the e-collar, prong collar, so that way they can try to manage that reactivity or aggression. So there's that. A lot of these other studies say inconclusive or not large enough data pool or bias, or they won't even tell you how they use the aversives. We can dive deep in that in another episode. I'll get somebody up that has a PhD in psychology and will actually look into these studies. So that'll be a future episode for sure.
It was interesting to me to see that the results didn't actually support even that.
I also noticed a pretty common theme in the comments to being dismissive of scientific studies, and I think I understand why that is. There are problems with all kinds of studies. I don't think any study is perfect.
Definitely not the studies
Far
that
from
are
it.
being cited about this research.
Right, and if
Okay, cool. So at least they're saying that the studies are not perfect. Great. That's good. Can they be repeated? That's what I want to know. If they can be repeated over and over and over again, that's great. I want to see the repetitions though.
Right, and if you understand scientific studies, you'll also understand that they're peer-reviewed. You understand that even the person doing the experiment has to do their best to acknowledge the flaws and even state those in the experiment itself. I can empathize with that perspective because I've been there before, but as I have grown and learned, scientists go much deeper than I think the average person realizes. In fact, the scientists understand that first and foremost, your job is to be as skeptical as possible, not to infer things. A good experiment just simply states what the observations
Yeah.
are.
Yes, absolutely. But the observations can also be very skewed. So a lot of these studies, these peer review studies they're talking about, again, in a very controlled environment, depending on the dogs that they're using, the dog's experiences throughout life until it got there to do the study and so on, they are going to be very skewed to one side. And then if we look at who actually paid for these studies, and you can do that too, a lot of them have an agenda, unfortunately. I can find just as many studies that actually show that utilization of an e-collar has lower stress levels when testing the cortisol and is more effective than treat withholding, for instance, which has a very low effectiveness in comparison with a higher stress level. But then again, that's also with German Malinois police dogs, high drive, highly motivated dogs. If I took the exact same study and did it with a lot of low drive dogs, it might be the opposite result. Dog training is all theoretical, so at this point, it's more of a morality thing, right?
Things can change in light of new evidence, so we're always keeping an open mind about new evidence. I'm telling you, if it was shown that aversive methods were better for dogs' welfare and at least as effective, I think I would have to consider using aversives. But right now, the
Perfect. Yes, aversives are better for the dog's welfare. I can actually explain that right now for you, Zach. So when we're using aversives, the goal is not to hurt the dog. And yes, a shock collar is going to use a stimulation. It's not a taser. It doesn't have an arc. It's not going to burn the dog. It's going to shock them still. It's still electricity. Um, it doesn't feel good. And yeah, sometimes it does hurt. A prong collar constricts, puts pressure from the prongs onto the neck and where the skin of the neck, and it doesn't feel good. It hurts. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. But at that moment, if it reduces the unwanted behavior and the behavior could be highly dangerous, is it more ethical to do something that may be momentarily painful for the dog or let the dog do something that is going to be life-ending, right? Or here's another thing, stress levels, right? Utilizing aversives is stressful. I get it, but it's stressful temporarily during that time. I actually have studies that can show that too. Again, we'll dive into that eventually. But at the moment, the stress levels are heightened and And that sucks. It does. But is it more ethical to add an increased amount of stress for a short amount of time or allow the dog to live with high levels of stress due to fear and anxiety for a very extended amount of time, months to years? Like, if we're talking about the what is more ethical, I think the use of an aversive to guide a dog in the correct direction, so that way we can start using positive reinforcement and proper classical conditioning on changing the emotional state towards something more constructive, is a lot more ethical than to try to get the dog through something they may never be able to get through with treats alone and then just drug the dog up. So.
But right now, the science doesn't seem to suggest that. We're about to start our next series. Every story is so different. This one coming up, which we are now done shooting, you want to talk about curveball after curveball. It was interesting.
Okay, so I don't really care about your adventures in Alaska. Let's jump through. I'm gonna skip ahead.
These series, selfishly, I really enjoy immersing myself in training dogs. It's the thing that I enjoy doing most.
Okay, so I need to look into this, so don't quote me completely. But from my knowledge, at this point, Zach handpicks a couple dogs a year that he can work with to train in his style of training. So I don't think Zach really immerses himself too much in dog training, or we would see a lot more content with a lot more different dogs. Yeah, and even with the dogs that he's training, there has been a couple I have noticed a lot recently. He's trying to get into like reactive dogs. And I'll have to make a video on this. But there's multiple dogs that there was no decrease in behavior, unfortunately. But each time, and it was board and trained living with Zach, and the excuse is the same each time. I didn't have enough time, right? 2 weeks should have shown some progress. I don't care who you are. Should have shown some progress if you're worth a damn at all in this industry. 2 weeks of living with you full time, you should be able to decrease some unwanted behavior.
Moira, the German Shepherd, and George are doing amazing. I keep up with both of them regularly. They're very happy in their homes. They're doing very well.
I'm so proud of them. They're just living life. It's
Yep.
great.
So the German Shepherd's actually one of the dogs that I do want to talk about. We saw them in their homes in that little clip. And the home is perfectly fine. It's out in public. I wish I could see what they are like right now out in public, because that's where Zach was having a lot of reactivity struggles. And you could see that he was really upset with himself, which I can understand completely. When a dog is more than you can handle, then it can get to you, right? Especially if you're unwilling to budge on your training methodologies.
Nonchalant. There's nothing going on under there. Ignore.
Nothing over here.
Ignore.
We get our ideas from you. I hope you guys always feel liberated to request what you want to see on this channel in the comments below. Let's continue the conversation in the comments below. If you guys want to try.
Okay, so I think that's it for this video with him. So my take on all of this is that aversives don't have to always hurt. They just have to be motivating enough to make the dog want to avoid whatever it is that they were trying to do. That's it. Now, the level of aversives that we use is going to be dog to dog dependent. You don't have to shock every single dog at a high level or a low level or a medium level. It just depends on the dog that you're working with. Same with a prong collar. Sometimes you don't even have to do any corrections with a prong collar. Just having that little amount of pressure is just enough, like. And there's so many different aversive tools. I mean, we can talk about head halties if we want and how dangerous those are and how aversive those are, but they don't look scary, right? So, yeah, I mean, every dog's going to be different. Every dog's going to have different levels of motivation to do different things. You cannot teach a dog what not to do until we tell it what not to do. And that is going to be through punishment, which only means to reduce a behavior. Reinforcement can potentially dampen unwanted behaviors, but it will never, ever, ever get rid of it because we've never taught the dog not to do that behavior. So at that point, you'll end up just having to just play management throughout the whole lifetime of the dog rather than actually trusting the dog to make the right decisions. And in operant conditioning, positive and negative reinforcement and punishment, if we got rid of the punishment side of things, we just got rid of 50% of a dog's learning capabilities. And that's a huge percentage. I much rather my dogs know what they can't do, know what they can do, and then make decisions based on that. Having a fear of certain things is completely appropriate for every single animal. Uh, will I touch a hot burner? Hell no. Why? Because I'm emotionally invested to stay the fuck away from a hot burner. Will I walk off a cliff? No. Why? Because it terrifies me. That's a healthy fear. Should a dog run out a door into traffic? Hell no. They should be afraid to do so. It's a healthy fear. That's what I got for you today. I hope y'all enjoyed this podcast episode. I know it wasn't as long as I normally have them, but eh, it was good enough. Good enough. So that's my thought. I am going to be doing a series soon enough on Zak George and then other trainers, not just positive only reinforcement trainers, balance trainer, compulsion trainers, and so on. And we're going to deep dive certain things that I may agree with and may disagree with. And everybody has their own opinions, and that's completely okay. If I disagree with somebody, it doesn't make them wrong. If somebody disagrees with me, it doesn't make me wrong. Again, dog training is all theoretical. We're doing the best we can for the dogs that we're working with. And that's pretty much bottom line. Yeah, that's what I got for you. Thank you.